All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into literally the single most incredible journey in the entire history of human life on Earth. We're talking about the epic story of our ancient ancestors leaving Africa and walking out into a world that had never, ever seen a human face before. It's this wild story of survival, sheer willpower, and just absolutely unparalleled adaptability. So, let's get right to it.
Okay, so I want you to just picture something for a second. Imagine you're standing right at the edge of literally everything you've ever known. Like right behind you, that's your family, your fire, your home, your safety. But in front of you is a stretch of land that absolutely nobody from your group has ever laid eyes on. You don't have a map, there's no plan, you have no way of knowing what kind of dangers, or wonders really, are out there. And yet, you decide to just walk forward anyway. So what really is at the edge of the unknown? Well, that unimaginable leap of faith actually happened tens of thousands of years ago.
Part 1. Stepping into the unknown. The journey begins. Okay, let's dive into this. How on earth did a tiny, seemingly insignificant group of early humans fundamentally change the face of the entire globe? Well, to understand that, we've got to look at the timeline of how this incredible journey actually started.
Now, what's super interesting about this timeline is the massive gap between those first 2 points. For the vast majority of our history, humans just stayed in Africa. That was the original home base, where our species emerged, roughly 300,000 years ago. We learned to make tools, how to talk, how to survive, all right there. But then, somewhere around 70,000 years ago, everything just shifted. A tiny group, and scientists estimate this was maybe just a few hundred individuals, finally started walking north and east. They left home. And shockingly, by 65,000 years ago, their descendants were already reaching Australia. But, how do we actually know all this?
Well, we know this thanks to the brilliant work of geneticists. If you're not familiar, a geneticist is a scientist who studies genes, basically the tiny biological instructions tucked inside every single one of your cells. So the crucial point here is that a Nobel Prize-winning geneticist named Svante Pääbo spent decades reading the DNA of ancient bones. And DNA is kind of like a biological recipe book passed down through generations, right? Through reading this ancient DNA, Pääbo proved something absolutely astonishing. He found that almost every single human being alive today who isn't of pure African descent shares the exact same tiny group of ancestors who took those very first steps out of Africa.
So where did they actually go first? Well, their very first stop was the Middle East. But hold on, it wasn't the vast, dry desert we picture today. Back then, it was actually much greener, much wetter, and just packed with rivers and animals. It was highly survivable. From there, they basically hugged the coastlines. They moved along what is now Iran, India, and Southeast Asia. They literally used the ocean as a highway, sustaining themselves on fish, crabs, and shellfish. They just stuck to what they knew.
But then, they did something truly mind-blowing. 65,000 years ago, that is when scientists believe the ancestors of the Aboriginal people of Australia actually made it to the Australian continent. And to do that, they had to cross the open ocean in rafts, or, really simple boats. They pulled this off tens of thousands of years before anyone on Earth had even invented a ship with a sail. Nobody handed them a manual or taught them how to do this. They literally just figured it out.
Part 2. The secret to survival, adapting to anything. Now this brings us to a massive question, really the core obstacle of our entire story here. How did these ancient travelers survive in completely alien environments that they had absolutely zero preparation for?
Just think about the stark contrast between them and us for a second. If we go somewhere new today, we're relying on heavy winter jackets, map apps on our smartphones, maybe popping into a grocery store. Ancient humans obviously had none of that. Anthropologist Chris Stringer over at the Natural History Museum points out that we often incorrectly think of these early humans as, primitive. But they weren't. They were highly intelligent problem solvers. When they walked into a totally new land, they had to figure out entirely from scratch which plants would feed them and which would kill them, and how to build shelters out of literally whatever sticks or stones just happened to be lying around. They survived on pure, unadulterated adaptability.
Part 3. The Neanderthal DNA Legacy. Meeting our cousins. So, as the journey continued, some groups didn't just keep going east toward Australia. Some actually turned north, up into Europe. And when they got there, they discovered something pretty shocking. Europe wasn't empty.
Yeah, Europe was actually already occupied by our evolutionary cousins, the Neanderthals. They'd been living out there in Europe for hundreds of thousands of years, way before our ancestors even showed up. And they were incredibly smart, robust, and super physically strong. For a while, early humans and Neanderthals were living in the exact same places at the exact same time. But here's the kicker. They didn't just fight for territory. They actually mixed. They interbred and had children together, long before the Neanderthals eventually went extinct roughly 40,000 years ago, likely due to disease, competition, or rapidly changing climates.
Now, what is really fascinating about this evolutionary timeline is what it means for you right now. If your ancestry traces back to pretty much anywhere outside of Africa, you currently carry between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA in your own body. Just let that sink in for a second. You are literally carrying around a biological piece of a species that vanished from the face of the earth 40,000 years ago.
And that ancient DNA isn't just taking up space in there either. It is actively working for you. Studies showed that those specific Neanderthal genes actually gave our ancestors' immune systems a massive boost. Remember, our ancestors were walking into totally foreign lands filled with brand new diseases they'd never encountered before. The immune system boost they got from mixing with Neanderthals literally helped them fight off those sicknesses. And incredibly, that genetic armor has been passed all the way down the line, right to you.
Part 4. Crossing the ice bridge into the freezing unknown. Okay, things are about to get extreme, because other groups of humans kept pushing further north and east, deep into Central Asia and Siberia.
Again, just imagine the contrast here. As modern humans, we basically freeze the second the heater breaks, right? And we rely on written manuals for pretty much everything. But our ancestors? They walked right into Siberia, where winters regularly dropped to minus 40 degrees, without a single written instruction. They had to figure out how to skin animals, tailor actually warm clothes from those hides, and build fully insulated shelters. I mean, it was an absolute masterclass in human resilience. And the crazy thing is, they just kept going. As they pushed east through Siberia, they encountered what we call the Bering Land Bridge. Now, because we were right in the middle of an ice age, sea levels were way lower than they are today. That exposed this massive strip of land connecting modern-day Russia straight over to Alaska. Our ancestors followed herds of animals right across this land bridge. And the wildest part of this whole thing, they had absolutely no idea they were stepping foot onto a brand new, undiscovered continent. They were literally just following their food. Once they hit North America, roughly 20,000 years ago, they didn't stop. They rapidly moved south. By 15,000 years ago, they were spreading straight through Central America. And by 12,000 years ago, they hit Tierra del Fuego. That is the very southern tip of South America in modern-day Argentina and Chile. So in just a few tens of thousands of years, human beings had walked across deserts, scaled mountains, and pushed through ice ages to populate almost every single corner of the globe.
Part 5. The power of collective learning. Why we succeeded. So the absolutely crucial point here is this. No other animal in the entire 4.5 billion year history of this planet has ever done anything even close to this. No other species has adapted to every single climate zone on Earth. So why did we succeed when so many other creatures just couldn't? Well, evolutionary biologist Joseph Henrich calls the answer collective learning. You see, our brains are uniquely built to share knowledge. Think about it. When one person figures out how to make fire, instead of just keeping it a secret, they teach others. They encode that vital knowledge into stories that stick in our memories. Then the next generation learns it without having to invent it all over again from scratch, and they even improve upon it. This compounding of knowledge over generations is basically the human superpower. It's exactly what allowed a few hundred people leaving Africa to eventually become the 8 billion people living across the globe today.
Part 6. You are an explorer, the legacy of stepping forward. Now, let's bring this entire 70,000-year history directly back to you, sitting right where you are today. Because, guys, this isn't just ancient history. This is your biology.
As the saying goes, you are not just descended from survivors. You are descended from explorers. Really think about that. Every single person listening to this explainer exists today because your ancestors saw something entirely unknown, incredibly dangerous, and deeply terrifying, and they walked toward it anyway. They crossed raging oceans on simple rafts, they scaled huge mountains, they braved freezing tundras, all driven by this deep, innate human curiosity to just see what was on the other side.
So, I want to leave you with one final question to think about. The next time you're faced with a new challenge, the next time something unfamiliar makes you want to just shrink back in fear, I want you to remember the DNA you carry. Remember that your entire existence is the result of brave people who flat out refuse to step back. Will you step forward into your own unknown? Thank you so much for exploring with us today.